The late 18th and early 19th centuries were filled with new ideas. Almost anything was questioned. Humanity's role as a sentient species of Earth, the allowed forms of self-expression, and the optimal way of life were just a few of these questions. In this video, we're going to make you learn, laugh, and definitely cringe. Now let's begin. The Romantic Movement, a time when love, passion, and candles by the bedside don't exist. Throw it out the window. Romanticism isn't actually a weird novel written by E.L. James that you'd find under your parents' bed. Romanticism is the era of revolutions in literature, painting, music, architecture, criticism, historiography, and turtles probably? Rejecting the ideas of order, harmony, balance, and rationality that usually characterizes the late 18th and early 19th century. Although it was a reaction against the Enlightenment, the Romantic movement essentially was an enlightenment in the arts. But enough about fake love for now. Let's get into the real hot topic of this period, Transcendentalists. If you're not a psycho book geek, I'd guess you're probably wondering what a Transcendentalist is. They believe that people have knowledge about themselves and the world that they can't detect with their senses, but not to a religious point. They believed in the power of foresight over logic. These more progressive younger minds fought hard against their old-like counterparts. These Transcendentalists manifested a new national culture, largely in part due to the Transcendental Club held in Boston in the home of George Ripley. If you're wondering who that is, don't worry, he's no one important. Who would even care about him when we got sick youngsters like Ralph Waldo Emerson? Emerson was like a 19th century Charlie D'Amelio, but with degrees. He did it all, from lecturer to poet to essayist. Man was perfect with a pen. When his questions about traditional doctrine led him to resign from the clergy in 1831, he became a leading figurehead for Transcendentalism. In 1840, with Margaret Fuller, he launched the newspaper The Dial, which became an important channel for Transcendentalist ideas. But someone else had a gift that would extend well into the future. That someone was Henry David Thoreau. Now, Thoreau was my kind of guy. He put his money where his mouth was. Between 1845 and 1847, he lived in a cabin by Walden Pond in Concord to demonstrate the advantages and satisfactions of a simple existence. The essays where he chronicles his daily life in such an environment were compiled in what is now considered his masterpiece. After spending a night in prison for opposing the Mexican-American War, Thoreau wrote his most famous essay, Civil Disobedience, where he defends private and individual conscience over the interests of the majority. The difference is that this was an essay he purposefully published, whereas his masterpiece came from his diary. His ideas about passive resistance were adopted later by figures such as Mohandas K. Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Surprise! There's one more member of our VIP list, and he leads us back into the misleading Romantic movement. Thomas Cole was just a dude who liked to create. He traveled throughout the northeastern United States sketching landscapes in pencil, and with them as a reference, he made finished paintings in his workshop. His most famous paintings depict the Hudson River Valley, as well as Great Allegory. That just means portraits and landscapes. His landscapes in particular earned praise as the greatest painter of his time period in America, and he believed that art is the true process of creation, imitating God, creating the wonders of the world. Cole also founded the Hudson River School, which was not a school and not located on the Hudson River. Kind of a dumb name, but hey, this is a Romantic period. Instead, the HRS was a large group of American landscape painters of several generations who worked between 1825 and 1870. The Hudson River School was the first native school of painting in the United States and was strongly nationalistic, both in its proud celebration of the American landscape and in the desire of its artists to diverge from European schools of painting. Alright, there might be one little factoid about George Ripley that's kind of important to the Romantic period. Ripley directed the Brook Farm, a short-lived utopian experiment in communal living. The 175-acre farm was located in West Roxbury, Massachusetts, which is now Boston. According to the Articles of Agreement, Brook Farm was to combine the thinker and the worker to guarantee the greatest mental freedom and prepare a society of liberal, cultivated people whose relations with each other would permit a more wholesome and simple way of life. Though teachers and other intellectuals often made up a significant portion of the population, farmers and craftsmen also joined the experiment. People were paid $1 a day for work. What a waste of time, in my opinion. But $1 in 1841 equates to about 30 buckaroos nowadays. It's just a little under minimum wage, but if you consider minimum wage back in 1841, that would be $1 a week. Brook Farm was also notably modern in its educational theory of its excellent school, which sought to establish perfect freedom of relations between students and the teaching body. And that just about sums it up. But if you weren't listening before, here's the TLDR. The Romantic movement was an enlightenment in the arts. Transcendentalists believed that humans had more effects on the world than we realized, but not to deity standards. Brook Farm was a failed Sims experiment. Emerson wrote a lot and furthered the Transcendentalist ideals. Thoreau was a Transcendentalist who believed that the individual matters more than the majority. Cole loved creating so much that he created a school for it. And the Hudson River School was not a school and not on the Hudson River, but a club of nationalistic, proud American painters. Confused? So are we. Ah, the wonders of romance.